Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. 96% of human beings are living poorly, in the sense that they're looking for lasting happiness where it cannot possibly be found. That's not only foolish and frustrating, but sad. We can do better. What's the cash value of all this talk about dropping attachments and opening to being? What difference does it really make? How does everyday life change? What's the concrete before and after like? A simple answer is that fear diminishes and love increases. I presented in other places, such as in Introduction to Living Well, a more thorough answer. Here's before raising our personal calibrations to 500, or 600, or higher. In Mastery in 7 Steps, I argued that rational human beings in becoming are lazy, greedy, ambitious, impatient, selfish, vain, and ignorant. Haven't you yourself learned that if you assume that others are like that, you'll be correct in nearly all cases? Don't you almost always suffer disappointment when you make the opposite assumption that they are not like that? Like the lives of many predatory animals, human life that's lived only in becoming operates under the principle known as the way of the world, which is the procedure of always attempting to lose or to avoid what we don't want and to gain what we want. This makes the material world a domain of ceaseless struggle, competition, and, for humans, warfare. Fear is perpetual. When traced back to their origin, all fears seem to be fear of death. Why does fear characterize the domain of becoming? When we don't have something we want, we fear that we won't get it. When we do have something we want, we fear that we'll lose it. Becoming is a fragmented domain in which we feel a constant need for belonging, or identity and acceptance by others. Life is nothing but a series of events happening randomly one after the other. Incessant conceptualizing deadens the domain of becoming. Everything lacks value. We seek frequent distractions to relieve us from that depressing thought. Drugs, sex, entertainment, and all such palliative measures don't work very long. We take ourselves to be the agents creating our lives, but we realize that we have no way to distinguish between the right actions that will redound to our glory and the wrong actions that will sink us. We want to be proud of our accomplishments, but we realize that, really, all our decisions are like shots into the dark. Time relentlessly attacks us and erodes both our minds as well as our bodies. We feel not only disconnected from others, but from ourselves as well. In our clearest moments, we realize that the worldly goods, such as pleasure, fame, and fortune that we chase so desperately, are ephemeral. Our continued existence is not only problematic, but of little or no lasting value. We continually look to the future for fulfillment. But we also know that our stories cannot have a happy ending because death, which is inevitable, will obliterate any meaning we'd like to attribute to our projects. Our mental health is, at best, unreliable and sometimes shaky. We haven't yet felt sustained happiness, satisfaction, completion, or fulfillment in the past. We don't now feel really happy or satisfied or completed or fulfilled. We cannot imagine how, in the future, we could feel any sustained happiness, satisfaction, completion, or fulfillment either, since that's when death will occur. So we spend our lives serving the self, only to realize the futility of that way of living, since the self will soon become non-existent. It's absurd. Here's after raising our personal calibrations to 500 or 600 or higher. When we step back from our lives and becoming, we realize that there really is a unity to them that comes from the unitary consciousness or awareness of all those apparently disconnected events. We stop identifying with all those different experiences, as well as with all those thoughts, opinions, emotions, and egocentric desires. Instead, we identify with the experiencer, witness, observer of them. How could that experiencer not be there? Letting go of the little self, the egoic mind, erodes the formerly impenetrable barrier to the great self. The more we drop the bad habit of incessantly conceptualizing, the more alive the world seems. Sense perception reveals more vivid and intense forms. Every form is interconnected to every other form. Nothing is separate from everything else. Our mental health seems, if not yet optimific, at least optimal, because separateness, loneliness, alienation dissipates. There's no longer any craving for acceptance by others. Others seem much less different and threatening than before. Instead of apparently operating by merely physical or chemical laws, the world seems pervaded by a loving spirit that renders it benevolent and harmonious. Everything radiates well-being and meaningfulness. The world becomes more amusing and entertaining than threatening. Contentment and peace swallow up apparent tragedies as we stop identifying others as separate persons or mere bodies. Abiding bliss, joy, and peace replace trauma and fear. There's no reason anymore to need to hope for future fulfillment. Life is good right now. The clarity and sanity of being replaces the pathological dysfunction and madness that characterizes becoming. All worry about the rightness or wrongness of our acts falls away as we realize that separate identities have yielded to incessant identifications, so that what used to be taken to be other is now no longer taken to be other. We're not so much creating our destinies as living through the unfolding of a divine order. We realize how non-attachment to all those thoughts, opinions, emotions, and desires has lightened life. Play has replaced worry as the egoic self has been transcended. Without identification with body, there is no more fear of death. Because that fear spawns all other fears, there's no fear left at all. The witness, the observing self, is here now. Its loving embrace excludes nothing. The importance of past and the future has dropped away. There's nothing lacking, nothing more required. What is thus. Again, I may not only be pointing beyond you, but I'm also pointing beyond myself. The desire for sagehood is the only non-egocentric desire. If that desire burns brightly for you, your destiny is to dissolve into the unlimited unity and love of being or God. If it doesn't yet burn brightly for you, my hope for you is that your continued suffering, sorrow, and dissatisfaction will motivate you to increase your personal calibration to 500 or higher. The only obstacle is your attachment to egocentricity, which you may begin to dissolve at any moment. Find some classic spiritual practice or other that suits you well, and master it. It's not easy, but it's just that simple. I wish you well. Peace.